now we're ready to get going. I want to introduce our first speaker of the day, acclaimed author and consultant, Jonny Bowden. Jonny is a nationally recognized nutrition expert, a board-certified nutritionist, and he's the author of 15 books on health, nutrition, and longevity. He's here to connect the dots between GLP-1s and all of the supplement opportunities that surround them. Jonny, great to have you here. The stage is yours.
I'm going to try to channel my inner New Yorker and talk at 1.5x because I will never finish all the stuff that we have to cover in this. So forgive me if I do that. And an early apology while he's getting the mic to the scientists in the group, because some of the things that I'm going to talk about are very complex and I'm going to have to simplify and just really pick the big ones. So if I leave something out or some detail, I'm very aware that I'm not covering every single aspect of this very complex and amazingly interesting subject. Do I need a mic? Am I waiting for one? Oh, there he goes. Good. So this works? Good. Okay, there are my financial disclosures. I want to start, excuse me, by telling you a secret, which is the secret of a successful presentation. All of you who are public speakers know this. So the secret of a successful presentation, impactful presentation, is you start by telling the audience what you're going to tell them. So I'm not going to break tradition with that. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to tell you. Three things. The first is these drugs have enormous potential, absolutely enormous potential. They don't work exactly the way most people think they work. They don't go into the adipose tissue, into the fat cells, and incinerate your fat. They don't do that at all. About 25% of what they do happens in the gut. It keeps food in the gut longer. It slows gastric emptying. But 75% of what they do is in the brain. And most of what they do work on this thing, which is called insulin resistance. How many people are really familiar with insulin resistance? Okay, great. Not as many as you will be by the time we're done. And you'll understand why I'm making such a big deal of this, because this is at the root of why people are coming to use GLP-1s. This is at the root of metabolic disaster that we're experiencing. I'm going to give you some statistics later on that are going to blow your mind about this. So we're going to talk about insulin resistance. It's impossible to talk about obesity and the cure for or treatment for obesity without talking about this root cause. The second thing I'm going to tell you is that these drugs, great as they may be, and the potential is enormous, have significant, and I mean significant, side effects. And the third thing I'm going to tell you is that these Trojan horses in the drugs, these side effects, present enormous opportunities for everybody in this room, not just to make money. You can make incredible products and services and programs to address these needs, but you're also going to be doing an amazing amount of good, because we are really facing a metabolic disaster in this country right now. And the fourth thing is my own private agenda that you'll have to decide whether it's accomplished or not, and that is to inspire you. Because the people in this room, this industry, can make such a difference. This is a once-in-a-generational opportunity, as far as I'm concerned. It has never come along in my lifetime. And I think it's a huge opportunity, and I want to inspire you to go out and formulate and make programs and services and supplements and foods that will address these needs. Because we are facing a true metabolic disaster. I work with a group in Nevada called Specialty Health. All they do is law enforcement. They work with special services, they work with the FBI, mostly they work with police departments, and their entire mission is to get these guys and women metabolically healthy, because they're not. They can't even climb upstairs. They're all overweight. The Army can't recruit enough people because they're not fit. So we're experiencing this metabolic disaster, and if you talk to the head of that group at Specialty Health, Dr. Greenwald, you can't talk to him for 1 minute without him bringing up insulin resistance, because that's what they're targeting. That's what they're trying to fix. Okay, so I want to start with a question, and it's going to sound like a really dumb question that everybody knows the answer to, but I want you to really think about it for more than a minute. Why do people go on GLP-1s? Now, I know the obvious answer This is what everybody's thinking. Johnny, why are you asking that question? We all know that. They go on GLP-1s to lose weight. Yeah, I get that. But think about it more like a psychologist. When these drugs were introduced, they had 3 enormous obstacles to being adopted, possibly the biggest obstacles you could imagine. Number one, they were incredibly expensive, like $1,500, $1,000 to $1,500 a month. Number two, they weren't covered by insurance. And number 3, they were injectable. I mean, you could not pick, you couldn't put together a bunch of things that would make people less likely to take a drug, yet there was a black market for them. People were lined up trying to get them. The supply couldn't keep up with the demand. Why is that? Because it wasn't just about losing weight. It was about what people thought would happen when they lost the weight. They would have a different life. They would step into their real self, their fuller self. They would shed their guards and their clothing and their excess weight and really step into a different way of being. They'd have more energy. They'd have more vitality. They'd be more attractive. And if you start unpacking that one, you get into, why do you want to be more attractive? For love, for acceptance, for better job, for all of these things. That's the pain points, not just the weight. You ask somebody if they'd rather be 15 or 20 pounds overweight and have vitality and energy and optimism and joy versus they're the perfect weight and they're miserable, everybody's going to pick the option where they're a little bit more overweight. And they should. So, will these people have those results? Maybe. Because there are huge hidden costs to these drugs, which is really what we're going to be talking about next. This is not the first time that a drug has come out that does something and has a big hidden cost. Any of you who know any of my work in the area of cholesterol and the great cholesterol myth, we talk about statin drugs a lot. Statin drugs are a perfect example of a drug with a hidden cost. They lower cholesterol just perfectly. There's nothing wrong with how they lower cholesterol, just like GLP-1s lower weight. Except that they also close off the mevalonate pathway, which prevents you from making coenzyme Q10, which is one of the most important nutrients for the heart. So yeah, they lower cholesterol, but they don't make your heart healthier because there's this hidden cost. Anybody in this room on a statin who hasn't been prescribed CoQ10, you should fire your doctor. Because if you're on a statin, you should be taking, I would say, 200 milligrams a day of CoQ10. But that's a sidebar. So what are the hidden costs of GLP-1s? What are the Trojan horses? Well, there are 3. And I'm going to go in order of, descending order of importance to the patient, to the customer. Most people don't notice the first one, which is nutrient depletion. Most of us are nutrient depleted in some way or another. But you don't normally notice it. Boy, I'm just not getting enough K2. I can feel it in my body. No, you don't notice that at all. But it has long-ranging and important effects. So that's opportunity number 1, is to repair these deficits. And we're starting to see a lot of research on exactly what those nutrients are that are missing. The second Trojan horse is digestive and gut problems. Now, this is the major reason people drop off of GLP-1, and there is an enormous dropout rate. I didn't check the recent statistics, they keep changing, but it's a double-digit number that drop off within the first 2 years. It's a double-digit number that drop off within the first 2 months, mostly for this, mostly for gut and digestive problems. And by the way, this is not limited to GLP-1, folks. This is a huge area, a huge opportunity. Everybody's got gut problems. In functional medicine, I was trained in functional medicine. We have a mantra, first treat the gut, because there's gut connections to everything. This is not some trendy thing that's just coming up now. This is something we've known for 20 years. So digestive and gut problems are the third, and now the big one. This is the one everybody notices. This is the reason people drop out. This is the thing that we really have to address, and that is muscle loss. Now, if you don't think that's a big deal, by the end of these, whatever 25 minutes that I get, you will know why muscle loss is a very big deal, bigger than you might have thought. Here's the start of it. Ozempic phase, Ozempic part. Go on TikTok. Look at the videos of this stuff. And what this really looks like in real life is not as pretty as this slide. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. Now, you might think, what does muscle loss have to do with Ozempic face? You know how many muscles there are in the face? 600. 600 muscles in the face. So when you lose muscle, of course you're going to get this. And the glutes are the biggest muscle in the body. Of course you're going to get this. And this is what people notice. This is the scariest statistic you should see today. Well, plus the one I'm going to give you later. Up to 40% of weight lost on Ozempic and Wegovy and all of the semaglutide drugs is muscle. Up to 40%. If you gain the weight back, guess what? You don't gain back 40% muscle. You gain back mostly fat. So your metabolism has changed. The number of calories you need to maintain your same old weight has changed. This is a very, very big deal. And this has to be prevented if people are going to have a successful experience on GLP-1s. In fact, this has to be prevented anyway. And you'll see why when we talk about the role of muscle. Now, you may find people who say, well, I don't care about any of this. I'm skinny. For the first time in my life, I can fit into my jeans. Great, except for not so fast kemosabe, because there's something called TOFI. And this is not some internet phenomenon. You know what it is on the internet? If you look on the internet, you'll see skinny fat. Skinny fat is the internet name for the medical term TOFI. And if you think this isn't a real thing, here's research going back to 2017 on the TOFI phenotype. TOFI stands for thin on the outside, fat on the inside. So these people have the same metabolic problems that the GLP-1 users went to GLP-1 drugs for. They're just not visible. Anybody heard of fatty liver? Okay, about 1/3 of us have it and it's undiagnosed. So they all have that. And other metabolic complications. They're just not visible. So muscle. When I was a trainer at Equinox, I started my career in 1991 at Equinox as a personal trainer, and then later as the dean of the Equinox fitness training program. And we thought muscles were for like looking good at the beach. I mean, really, that's what they were for. We didn't really think of them in terms of longevity. But now, and a good person to check out on this is Dr. Gabriella Lyon. She has a great podcast, and she's said many times, the quality of your life is a direct correlation to your muscle health. Muscle is the organ of longevity. Think about that for a second. I always ask my audiences this, and I get very interesting answers. I won't ask you because we won't have time, but think to yourself, what do you think the number one risk for death is? Across the board, everywhere. And people usually say heart attacks, or cancer, or some clever people say war, mankind, accidents, murders. None of those. It's frailty. It's frailty. And what is frailty except total loss of muscle? No bodybuilder at 3% body fat and a lot of muscle falls, breaks a hip, and dies. Just doesn't happen. It happens when your bones are porous, when you're frail, when your muscle is gone, when you have sarcopenia, which is the medical term for muscle loss. And what are the symptoms? What are the things that happen when you're frail? All this stuff. So we need to keep our muscle. And I put this slide up, muscle is your best ally in the fight against insulin resistance. But it's also your best ally in the fight against weight. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. Muscle contains things called the mitochondria that is not in fat cells. Those are the energy central little organelles that burn fat and detox and give you energy and make ATP and do all that good stuff, and it's only in the muscle cells. So muscle has a great deal to do with metabolic health and with weight loss. Muscle creates a demand for the sugar that's in your bloodstream, causing diabetes. You get insulin resistance, I'll explain it in a minute, because the muscles don't need any more sugar, so they leave it in the bloodstream. When you have muscle and you're working out, you're creating a demand for that. So muscle is incredibly important. Anybody know who Ben Bickman is? Just fast hands. Okay, everybody go home and look him up and start listening to him. He's one of the great metabolic researchers of our time. He's on 1 million podcasts. And the way I heard of him, he wrote a fantastic book, highly recommended. It's called Why We Get Sick. It's kind of a unified field theory of sickness and disease. Guess what chapter 1 is? Insulin resistance. I've been saying this for, 10, 15 years in books and podcasts and lectures. Insulin resistance, which, by the way, is pre-diabetes. So everybody knows what pre-diabetes is, right? This is a synonym. So insulin resistance is the metabolic plague of the 21st century. When COVID came out, every nutritionist in the world, including me, got 8,000 questions on YouTube and different platforms about, what should we do? And we looked at the comorbidities. What were the comorbidities for COVID? Everybody can probably remember a half a dozen. Hypertension, prediabetes, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, liver, kidney, lung. Guess what they all have in common? Every single one of them. Statistically significant connection to insulin resistance. It's either a causal, as it is in prediabetes, or one of the main causes, or it's a promoter, or it's a force multiplier. But it's attached to every one of those conditions. So let's talk 2 seconds about what insulin is and what it does. And this is an hour's talk that I'm going to condense to like 2 minutes. But insulin basically has a major job, which is to take excess sugar from the bloodstream and get it into the muscle cells. That's its job. So here's where it goes wrong. Where it goes right is, if you had a kid with a very healthy metabolism back in, say, the 1950s, before we had play dates and computers, kid eats a small meal, blood sugar goes up a little bit, he goes out, he's going to play, he's going to ride his bike, he's going to play on the jungle gym. And so the pancreas secretes a little bit of insulin. The insulin says, come on, blood sugar, come on, we're going to take you into the muscle cells. Muscle cells are delighted to have it because the kid is actually going to use those muscles and need that energy. And then eventually the blood sugar goes down, the kid is hungry, he goes back and he eats, and that's a normal metabolism. It's not the metabolism of adults in America. So we eat a ton of carbs, and let's face it, it's always carbs. Why? Because how many of you have ever sat in front of the TV at 11 o'clock at night watching reruns of Friends and said to yourself, God, I'm craving some Brussels sprouts. God, if only I could have a steak and broccoli. Never. But you can eat 6 bowls of cereal while you're watching that, can't you? Easily. So we eat too many carbs. We're wired to do that. Our blood sugar keeps going up. The pancreas keeps panicking. And the muscle cells say, we don't need this sugar. What's this guy going to do all day? He's going to go to the office. He's going to sit in front of a computer. Then he's going to go home and play with a clicker. We don't need it. And they become resistant. The best way I can explain insulin resistance is I lived in New York City for 50 years. People come and visit New York City, and they go, how can you sleep? The noise. We got the garbage cans, the ambulances, the sirens, the gunshots. It's just constantly noise. And we go, we don't hear it. And I lived in New York apartments for decades. You don't hear it. You get inured to it. A bomb has to go off next door in the next door apartment for you to hear the noise because you're resistant to it. You're just adapted to it. And that's what happens with the muscle cells and insulin. It's like, no more sugar, no more insulin. We're not interested. We're not even noticing that you're trying to get in. And that's insulin resistance. The symptoms are everywhere. Weight gain is number one, but every one of these metabolic things happens and is connected to it. So insulin resistance is basically a fat-storing hormone that won't turn off. And who's insulin resistant and who's not? There's a very good low-tech way of telling whether you're insulin resistant or not. I always talk about this on podcasts when they say, how do you know if you're insulin resistant? I say, stand in front of a wall, walk very slowly towards the wall, like an inch at a time, and if your belly touches the wall before your nose, you're insulin resistant. End of story. It's like 95% accurate. So a person with low body fat and high muscle mass is insulin sensitive. That's what we want. And this is a person who is not insulin sensitive. And again, scientists, I'm oversimplifying. There's lots of things that make us obese. socio-cultural things, norms, genetics. There's a million different factors. But this is the big one. This is like if you were talking about the Lakers, my home team in LA, and said, why are they such a great team? There's a lot of reasons, but Kobe Bryant's one of the, if you were analyzing this 5 years ago, you'd say Kobe Bryant. This is the Kobe Bryant of why we get fat. Insulin resistance. So this is one of the things you guys should be targeting. It's a bigger picture than just targeting weight. Remember, people come to GLP-1s for pain points. Many of them drop out. Many of them can't tolerate. Their pain points didn't go away. So if you understand why those pain points are happening, you can address the root cause of it. It's like hair loss is a huge pain point for people. And minoxidil works, the new one, not the old one that grew peach fuzz, but the new ones actually grow heads of hair. Except if you have high blood pressure, you can't go on them. So what happens to the people who can't go on minoxidil and want to grow hair? They didn't go away. They still have that pain point. So the more you can understand the root causes of hair loss and address those, you're addressing this huge population, not just the people who are on minoxidil. It's the same thing with GLP-1. So we want to get across to people that muscle is not just for gym bros. Look at all the things it does. It's critical for glucose regulation, insulin sensitivity, it's anti-inflammatory, and it protects against frailty. It does a lot of things. There's a 23% reduction in all-cause mortality from strength training. If you had a drug that gave you 25% less chance of dying at any given time, they'd be lined up for that. And this is that drug. And what we have to get people to understand is it doesn't have to look like that. That's great, but all we really have to do is preserve what we have, maybe gain a little bit more. It doesn't have to be that. That's wonderful, but that's not the only way that we can take care of our muscle into our 90s and beyond. So what are the opportunities? There are basically three categories. The first is, what stimulates GLP on its own? And there is a lot of research on this now. Now, don't get too excited when I tell you what some of the things are, like avocados, for example, and say, I'm going to go out and make a big avocado supplement because that's going to... It stimulates GLP-1, but the bad news is it doesn't do it enough. GLP-1 in our own body lasts about 8 minutes. So maybe this gets you up to 10 minutes, but the drugs get you up to a week. So these are important, and they're great foods, and I don't mind recommending them as GLP-1 stimulators because they're the same foods that reduce insulin resistance and the same foods that reduce weight. So they're good foods, so there's nothing wrong with it, but don't over-expect. I want to manage your expectations on natural forms of GLP-1 stimulators. So there's good research on it. We know all the foods. Here are the basic ones: almonds, oatmeal, avocado. Pistachio was the big surprise for me. Who knew pistachio nuts were as healthy as they are? They're very, very good for you. Even I didn't really know that. And they do stimulate GLP-1. So do peanuts, so do eggs, and two that didn't make the visuals are whey protein and, anybody guess? Yogurt. Okay, so here's another food or another substance that makes two of the three lists. One for the stimulators, one for gut health, and that is partially hydrolyzed guar gum. The brand Sunfiber is probably the most respected, most known, but partially hydrolyzed guar gum is a kind of fiber that not only stimulates GLP-1, it's just incredibly healthy for the gut because it's a prebiotic fiber that feeds the good guy bacteria in your gut. Here's a study showing all the foods and all the substances that stimulate GLP-1. This comes from the study. Fermentable fiber, fermentable fiber, fermentable fiber, decreased food intake, and weight gain. So this is a great thing to formulate with. And now we move to gut health. I put this slide in because it's so amusing. I just had to. So for anybody who's a skeptic on gut health and its importance, these are two mice, Ralph and Louis. They are identical twins. They came from the same litter. They raised in the same lab, same people handling them, same air temperature, same food, same everything. Except that Ralph got a fecal transplant, which is like a microbiome transplant. and you got a fecal transplant from an obese mouse. That's how important the gut is in weight. So what are we going to do for gut health? Well, I mentioned sun fiber. I mentioned partially hydrolyzed guar gum. This is a very interesting company doing very interesting things. What Wellvine did was they looked at the leftover stuff from making wine. We dump tons of this stuff. It's called the pomace or marc. It's the stems, the seeds, the skins of the grapes after they've made the wine. And they did a very smart thing, which, by the way, very note to self. Before you throw out large amounts of edible foods, investigate what's in them. There might be something really good in those things, right? Whey protein, one of the biggest sellers in the world. Whey was the waste product from cheese making until somebody got the idea, hey, let's look and see if there's anything good in this. Oh, yeah, there is. So that's what Wellvine did with the grapes, with the leftover stuff from winemaking. And they found it was like a bonanza of healthy compounds for the gut, particularly something called oligosaccharides, which are a prebiotic fiber. And now they're using AI to try to figure out which of the oligosaccharides are most likely to yield human benefits. And then they're doing research on that. And they're working with the University of California at Davis to figure out which ones are the most likely to be productive in terms of research. And you can formulate with that product. People have formulated with it. In fact, at the last show, I tasted a chocolate that's made with Wellvine. And it was quite delicious. And there's a chocolate that can be sold and said, this is good for your gut. And you can actually say that because we have good evidence for it. So these are the kinds of things that we can be doing. Probiotics and prebiotics are going to be even more important and even more targeted. My friend Daniel Amen actually created a probiotic where he looked at the evidence for mood effects of certain strains and then included those strains. And that's just going to get bigger and bigger. And then the big one is protein. I took this picture at my supermarket last week before I came down. Because when a magazine, one of these one-off magazines, gets produced for the supermarket audience, you know it has reached a tipping point in terms of public awareness. So people are now getting much more aware of protein. And the fact that, oh, what a surprise, the government recommendations were too small. I can't believe they got it wrong. We used to be told 0.8, when I was a trainer, we were told, up until very recently, I think they still tell them this, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, which turns out to less than half a gram per pound. It's not enough, folks. It's enough to prevent something called kwashiorkor, which is protein deficiency disease. That's those distended bellies you see in very poor East African countries. And the little kids with the... I've been in practice 34 years. I've never seen a case of that in my life. We're not talking about preventing protein deficiency. We're talking about optimal health and getting enough muscle. And muscle is made from protein. It's that simple. Weight training is the stimulus for muscle growth. Protein is the material for muscle growth. So, big opportunity there. And everybody's aware of it now. And that's all people are talking about. People like Peter Attia, Medicine 3.0, one of the great doctors in America, is now talking about 100 milligrams a day for optimal health. My friend Esther Blum, one of the great menopause experts of all time, is talking about 100 grams a day for her pre- and postmenopausal women. And it's very hard to get that from food. You gotta go supplement. Couple of ways to do it. You can do protein powders. Obviously, this is an interesting concept. This company makes an amino acid blend, just 8 of the 9 essential amino acids in what they claim is the perfect proportion. And they have clinical evidence. It's not on PubMed yet, but in their clinics and their studies, they found that this is the ideal proportion for muscle building, and therefore a small amount of the pure aminos is equal in terms of what you would absorb to, say, 30 grams of whey protein. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but it's definitely a direction for research and for investigation in terms of supplements. When I was a trainer at Equinox, again, there were 2 bodybuilding supplements that worked. 2 and only 2. There were 8,000 ads for fast gainer, big gainer, muscle this, cut this. None of them worked, except these 2. Creatine and HMB. And when I stopped being in the gym world and got into nutrition and life coaching and all the stuff I do now, I kind of forgot about them. Because, who needs them, right? Except not anymore. because they have made the hugest comeback for a couple of reasons. Let's take creatine. We now know that creatine is a cognitive enhancer. It's good for the brain, particularly people over 40. So creatine is the bomb. HMB was recently researched with older people, the people who are most in danger of losing muscle, and it was found, especially in combination with vitamin D3, to preserve muscle in older people. You should be lining up to get these ingredients into your products. I want to, before I close, I want to just touch on two substances that I wish I had stock in, I wish I had a financial interest in, but I don't. Akkermansia is a probiotic. I have, I think, one of the 5 greatest cardiologists in the country. And last time I saw him, he, very dramatic, I won't mention his name because this was a very unscientific statement, but it was between us. And he said, Johnny, I'm taking this thing. You're going to start taking it. You're never going to get a heart attack. It was Akkermansia. So this is a powerful probiotic that has wide-ranging effects. I'm working with a company now called Husband Vitamins. They're putting it in everything. So this is very, very important to know about. And the other thing that's important to know about, and I know a lot of you work for companies or are the companies that make really good non-caloric sweeteners like monk fruit, which I love, or stevia. No disrespect meant, this is the future. This is a completely different category. This is what's called a rare sugar. It's found in nature in a few foods like figs and raisins. But the point is, this is not just a less bad sweetener. This is a good-for-you sweetener. This one has been investigated for its effects on metabolic health, which is really what we're talking about here. Here's a study. The metabolic and endocrine effects of a 12-week allulose-rich diet, they're all good. They're all good. Enhancing glucose regulation, appetite control, all the parameters of insulin resistance. Okay, here's the statistic I told you I'd give you at the end. Only 12% of Americans are considered metabolically healthy. Now, what's shocking, if you go online and you look up 88% of Americans are not metabolically healthy, you'll find a ton of stuff, except here's the thing, this is obsolete. You know why? Because the figure is now 7%. 93% of us have some marker for prediabetes, which is on the road to metabolic disaster. So we're going to need products that offer metabolic support in general. One that I love is black seed oil. ThymoQuin's my favorite. Berberine, which does so many things. I just did a webinar on berberine. It's an hour's worth of talk. It does everything you want it to do. It helps with appetite, insulin control, all of those things. Activates AMPK, which is an enzyme that does all kinds of good things. So these things are basic metabolic support that's going to be needed more than ever as people realize it. And finally, I talked to Ben Bickman before I did this, and I said, Ben, what do you want me to tell the food industry, the ingredient industry, and the supplement? What do you want them to know? What's the most important message? And he said, Johnny, what are you going to tell them? And I told him what I was going to tell you, and he said, that's what I want to tell them. And the bottom line of what we both want to tell you is we got to change the conversation from weight loss to metabolic health, because that is the real cause of everything we're talking about today. So change that conversation and you will make a major difference in ways that really can't even be calculated. And it's really up to you, and I believe you guys can do it. So thank you so much for listening. And
Johnny, thank you so much. Fantastic. Let's give a round of applause for Jonny Bowden. Look him up online. You'll find him on lots of podcasts, and he's got tons of books, and really appreciate it, Johnny. That was fantastic.